In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Vue JS 3 to create the same simple to-do app using both the Options API and using the Composition API as well. If you're new here, my name's Danny. I'm an indie app developer and creator of Budget. If you want to learn about Vue JS, web development and app development and all that good stuff, please consider subscribing. Every subscription helps me to create more content for this channel. So what we're going to do here is create this very simple to-do app where we can add to-dos and we can delete to-dos, and we have a computed property telling us how many to-dos we have. And we're going to create this first of all using the good old Options API by using data, methods, computed, properties, and watches. And then we're going to recreate the same app on this page using the Composition API instead by using the new setup method and all of the Composition API's equivalents for data, methods, computed properties, and watches. Let's get started by creating a new Vue 3 project using the Vue CLI. So I'm just going to Google Vue CLI, jump to the Vue CLI page, get started, installation. And if you don't have Node installed, then you'll need to have that installed, which you can get to at nodejs.org. Probably want to install the one on the left. Once that's installed, you can then install the Vue CLI with this command. And you should then be ready to create a new project. So I'm going to jump to creating a new project. And we just need to run Vue, create, and then the name of our project. So I'm going to jump to my terminal, which is just running within VS Code, which is the editor I'm using. And you want to make sure you're in the folder where you store your projects. And then I'm going to run Vue, create. Let's call it Vue-options-vs-composition. And I'm going to choose manually select features. I'm going to enable the router and disable the linter so we don't get loads of annoying messages. And then I'm just going to hit enter. And then I'm going to choose Vue 3. I'm going to choose no to history mode. I'm going to choose in dedicated config files. Then I'm going to choose no to save this as a preset. Okay, it's finished creating the project. So now we just need to run npm run serve in the folder it's created. So I'm going to drag the folder it's created into VS Code. Then I'll open up the terminal and just run npm run serve. Okay, that's now running, so I'm just going to command and click on this link to open up our project. Let's start by setting up a page for the Options API and a page for the Composition API. So I'm going to jump to Source and Views, and these are the pages currently being used, Home and About. So I'm going to rename the Home component to options.view, and I'll rename the about component to composition.view, and I'll jump to the router file, router index.js, and I'm going to replace home here and here and here and here with options. And then in this second route, I'm going to change the path to /composition, change the name to composition, and update the path here to composition.view, and I'll save that. And we also need to update these links in the nav bar. So I'm going to jump to app.view, change the text in this first link to Options API, and change the text in the second link to Composition API. And we need to change the path here as well to /composition. Save that. Let's see if that's working. Yep, seems to be working. Okay, let's create a nice simple to-do app on this options page using the Options API first. So I'm going to go to Views and Options.view, and I'm going to remove this Hello World component, which is adding all this text and stuff. I'm going to remove this import and remove this components object as well. And I'll save that. And we now just have this Vue logo. So I'm going to stick a H3 on the page, which just says you have XXX to-dos. Later on, we'll replace this XXX with the number of to-dos using a computed property. And then underneath that, I'm going to add a div with an import inside it. I'm going to split the attributes on that using the split HTML attributes extension in VS Code. And I'll add a placeholder to this, which just says add a to-do. Save that. And then underneath this div, I'll add another div where we can display our to-dos. So I'll add an unordered list and an li. And within that, I'm going to add a span with the name of our task. Just put 1 in there. Then I'm going to add a button with an X, which we can use to delete it. And I'll just duplicate this li a couple of times. Change this one to 2 and then this one to 3. I'll save that. And this is not the prettiest, so let's add a little bit of style. So I'll add a style block. Let's style this UL. I'll set the list style to none to get rid of these bullets. And I'll set the padding to 0 to get rid of the space on the left. I'll set the width to, let's say, 200 pixels. I'll use margin to put it in the middle. So I'll set the margin to 0 on the y-axis and then auto on the x-axis. Let's add a bit of margin to the top. So I'll set the top margin to 20 pixels and the bottom margin to 0. Then I'm going to style the LIs, the list items. So I'll give each one of those a border. So border 1 pixel solid, save that. And I'll set the display to flex. And I'll add a bottom margin to each one. So margin bottom, set that to 10 pixels. And to push this button over to the right, I'm going to style this span inside the LI. So LI span. And I'll make that grow by setting flex grow to 1. Save that. And this is looking decent enough now. Okay, let's set up an array to store our to-dos. I'm going to get rid of this name property. Don't really need that. And I'll add a data method that returns an object. We'll create an array called to-dos. And each one of these will be an object with an ID property. I'll set this one to 1. And then a name property. I'll just set this one to 1 like that. And I'll duplicate this a couple of times. Update the IDs to 2 and 3. And I'll update the names as well. I'll save that. And we want to spit these to-dos out on the page. So I'll jump up to these LIs. I'll get rid of all except the first one. I'll add a v-for directive to this. We want to iterate through this to-dos array. So I'll use to-do as the placeholder. So v-for to-do in to-dos. And we also need a key property. And I'll set that to this ID. So to-do.id, to-do.id. Save that. And we see 3 to-dos, but they all say 1. So we need to replace this 1 text with double curly braces. And then the name property. So to-do.name. Save that. Okay, let's add the ability to add a to-do here. So first of all, we need to bind this input to a data property. So I'll add a new data property and we'll call it new to-do name. Set it to an empty string. And then we'll bind this property to this input by using a vmodel. So I'll add vmodel, set that to new to-do name, save that. And to check that's working, let's just put something in this string here. And we see it in there, so that's hooked up all right. Okay, so I want to add a to-do when the user hits enter when they're in this field. So I'm going to jump to the input and add an event handler here, and we'll add a key up event handler, and we'll add the .enter modifier. So this will be fired whenever the user hits enter when they're in this field. And we'll trigger a method called add to do. And we need to create that method. So I'll add a methods object, and we'll add this add to do method. Just make sure that's working. I'll just log out add to do. Jump to the console. And if we hit enter when we're in this field, yep, that's firing. So all we want to do here is set up an object like this and push it to this to-dos array. So I'll set up a new to-do object. Let's call it new to-do. Set that equal to an object with an ID field. And to get a roughly random ID, we can just use date.now. And the name property, we're going to grab that from this new to-do name property. So we can just set this to this dot new to-do name. Then we just want to push this to-do to this to-dos array. So we can just do this dot to-dos dot push new to-do. So I'll save that, see if that's working. Type something in here and hit enter. Yeah, that's working, but it's not clearing this field here. So let's also clear the field by setting this new to-do name property, which is bound to that input, back to an empty string. So we can just do this dot new to-do name equals empty string. Save that. And that's now working. Okay, let's add the ability to delete a to-do when we click on this button here. So I'll jump to that button, which is here, and we'll add a click handler, so at click. And we'll trigger a method called delete to-do. And we'll pass in the index of the current to-do, so the position of the to-do in the array. And to get access to the index, we need to place our placeholder here into parentheses and pass in the index as a second parameter. So let's create this delete to do method. Delete to do, pass in the index, and I'll just log out the index for now. Make sure that's working. So if I click on one of these buttons, yeah, we see 0. And then for the second one, we see 1. Okay, so to remove the index from the array, we can just use the splice method. So we can just do this .todos.splice. And we want to remove the item which is at the position of index, which we're passing in. So I'll put index here. Then we just want to add comma and 1 to make sure we only remove one item. So I'll save that. See if that's working. Yep, that seems to be working. Okay, let's use a computed property to spit out the number of to-dos here. And we could just spit out the length of the to-dos array like this. To-dos.length. Which works, but I want to use a computed property because I want to demonstrate using computed properties in the composition API later on. So instead of doing that, I'm going to set up a computed property. So I'll do that after the data method. So computed. And we'll call this todos count. We just want to return something. What we want to return is the length of this array. So I'm just going to return this .todos.length, save that, and I'll replace this here with our computer property name, todos count, save that. Let's make sure that's working. So we see 3, and if we delete stuff, it says 2. If we add 1, it says 3 again. So I also want to demonstrate using watchers in the composition API later on. So let's add a watcher which stops people from swearing in this field. So I'm going to jump to our data. I'll add an array here called swear words. We'll just put some swear words in there. So fart. And let's add butt hair. And we'll add willy. Okay, so let's add a watcher which will watch the value in this input by watching this new to-do name property. So down at the bottom here, I'll add watch object, and we want to watch the new to-do name property. And this method will return the new value every time it's changed. So for now, I'll just log out new value, save that. So if I type something in here, we can see the latest value always being logged out. So now we want to check whether what the user has typed matches matches any of our swear words. So childish. Right, so what we can do is we can do if this dot swear words dot includes, which will check if any of the items in this array include something. And then into that, we can just pass new value. And we probably want to convert that to lowercase. So I'll use the to lowercase method. And if this is the case, then we want to stop them because they're bad people. So what we could do is set this dot new to do name. So this property that's bound to the input back to an empty string to clear it out again. Then we could fire an alert which says you must never say, and then we'll output the new value. Then we'll just add a couple of exclamation marks at the end. So I'll save that. So if we type in most strings, we don't have a problem. But if we type in butt hair, we see an alert, you must never say butt hair, and the field is now cleared. Okay, this app is pretty much finished now. So let's recreate the same app using the composition API. So I'm just going to copy everything that's on options.vue, And I'm going to jump to composition.vue in the views folder. I'm just going to paste over this. And I'll save that. Jump to the composition API page. And we can see our app here. And we're not going to be changing the template here. This is an important thing to note about the composition API. Everything in the template stays the same. So we still use the same directives like v4, vmodel. We use event handlers in the same way, and we still output data and computed properties in the same way. So we don't need to change anything here. It's only the way we set up our data, methods, computed properties, watches, and a few other things that we do differently with the composition API. So with the composition API, we don't have a data method, a computed object, a methods object, a watch object. So I'm just going to comment all of this out. And what we do instead is we use a setup method. So I'm going to add a setup method like this. And we're going to set up all of our data, methods, computed properties, and our watcher within this method. Let's set up some variables for our data. So our new to-do name property, our to-dos array, and our swear words array. So with the composition API, we just do this with variables. And if we want our variable to be reactive, then we need to either use the ref method for simple variables like strings, booleans, arrays, or we need to use a reactive object for objects that we want to be reactive. And for now, we're just going to use refs, but we will cover reactive objects later on. So let's set up a ref for our new to-do name variable, which our input is looking for here. So all we need to do is set up a variable like usual. So the name needs to be new to-do name. And we want to set that equal to the ref method. And we need to import this ref method from Vue. So let's import ref from Vue. And we can now use this method. And we just put our initial value inside this method. So this needs to be an empty string. So our new to-do name ref is now set up. However, this won't work just yet because every variable or method that we use that we want to be available in our template, we need to return that at the end of this setup method. So we just add a return at the end of this setup method, and we can just pass in new to-do name like that. So let's save that and see if it's hooked up okay. So if we set this value to something and save it, we can now see it in this input because this input already has a vmodel on it, which is looking for a variable called new to-do name, which we've just set up here. So I'll just set that back to an empty string and save that. Okay, let's set up another ref for our to-dos, which this v4 loop is looking for. So again, we just do let to-dos, trigger the ref method, and pass the initial value in here. And this is going to be an array. Because our template is already hooked up to this to-dos variable in this v4 loop, we should be able to pass some to-dos into this array and see them on the page. So I'll just copy these to-dos from the options API code and paste that into this array and just remove the comments. And I'll save that. And we're not seeing them because we also need to return this to-dos variable at the end here. So I'll add to-dos here, save that. And we can now see some to-dos on the page. And I'll just set this array back to an empty array for now. And we also need a variable for our swear words array. However, this doesn't need to be reactive because we're not using this array anywhere in our template. And we're not going to be making any changes to this array. So this can just be a normal variable or constant. In fact, let's make it a constant because it's not going to change. So I'll just do const swear words equals, and then I'll just copy the array from down here and paste that there. And because this is not a reactive property or variable, we don't need to return it at the end here. So we don't need to add it here. Oh, and that should be swear words. So I'll save that. So let's set up some methods for adding a to-do and deleting a to-do. And before we do that, I'm just going to comment out this H3 just to get rid of some warnings in the console. So how do we set up methods using the composition API? Well, we just use standard JavaScript functions, and then we just add them to our return statement at the end of the setup method, but only if they're being used by the template, which both of our methods are. We're triggering the add to do method here, and we're triggering the delete to do method here when we click the button. So when we hit enter when we're in this field, this event listener is trying to fire a method called add to do. So let's create that method. So I'll create that here. So function add to do, and I'll just log out add to do for now. And we also need to add that to our return statement at the bottom. So add to do. I'll save that. And because this input already has this keyup.enter handler, which is looking for an add to do method, then this should hopefully already be working. So if we hit enter, yep, we see add to do being logged out. So now let's copy the functionality from the original method, which is here, and paste it into this new method and remove the comments. Okay, so we're setting up a new to-do object here with an ID and a name property. And we want to grab the name from this new to-do name ref, which is attached to this input. So we don't want to use this new to-do name here. That's not going to work. We just want to grab the value from this variable here. So I'll replace this with new to-do name. However, this is not going to work just yet because when we set up a ref like this, it actually creates an object. And within that object is a value property. And that's where it stores our value. So we need to change this here to new to do name dot value. And I'll save that. So we've set up our new to do object, and we then want to push it to this to dos array. So again, we don't want to use this dot to dos. We just want to push it into this array here. And again, the value of this ref is going to be at to dos dot value, not just to dos. So we need to change this to dos dot value dot push. And we then push this object there. And this line at the bottom was just setting the new to do name property back to an empty string to clear out this input. So again, we want to set the value of this ref back to an empty string. So we need to change this to new to do name dot value. So I'll save that, and hopefully this should be working now. So I'll try and add a task. Yeah, seems to be working. Okay, let's set up a method for deleting a to-do again. So when we click this delete button here, which is here, we have a click handler, and it's trying to fire a method called delete to-do, and it's passing in the index of the current to-do within the array. So let's create a method called delete to-do and receive that index. So I'll add that here. So function delete to-do, and we want to pass in that index, and I'll just log out the index for now. We also need to add this function to our return statement. So I'll add that here, delete to do, and save that. And let's see if that's working. Click on the delete button, see index 0, click on the next one, index 1. So what do we want to do here? We just want to remove the item from this to-dos ref, which is at the index, which we're passing in here. So again, our array is not going to be at to-dos, it's going to be at to-dos.value. So we want to do todos.value.splice, pass in the index, because we're going to delete the item which is at the position of the index that we're passing in. Then we just want to add 1 so that it only removes one item. So I'll save that. Let's see if that's working. I'll add some tasks and click some delete buttons. And yeah, that seems to be working now. If you found this video useful so far, please consider smashing the like button and leave a comment. Tell me what you think about the composition API. Okay, let's get our computed property working now. So I'm going to uncomment this H3, where we were previously spitting out a computed property called todos count, which just simply counted the todos array. And so how do we create computed properties with the composition API? Well, we need to use the computed method. And we need to import this method. So I'll add that here to our import. And we want to set up a computed property called todos count. So let's set that up after our variables here. And so we just want to set up a variable with whatever the name is that we want to use. We want to use this todos count name. So I'll do let todos count. And we set that equal to a computed method like this. And then inside here, we can just return something, just like we did with Options API computed properties. So what do we want to return? Well, we want to return the length of our to-dos array. So we can just do return to-dos. And remember, our array is actually at todos.value. So we need to return todos.value value.length. So I'll save that, and we should hopefully see our to-dos count here. And we're not, because again, we need to return this computed property. So I'll add that to our return here, and I'll just split this up a bit into variables, computed properties, and methods. So I'll save that, and we can now see you have 0 to-dos. And if we add some, we can see that it updates. Let's add our watcher back in, which stops people from entering swear words, because currently we can enter fart, and that's just not acceptable. So how do we set up watchers using the composition API? Well, it's fairly similar to computed. We need to use the new watch method, and we need to import that method from Vue. So I'll add that up here, watch, and we'll place our watcher down here after the functions. So what we want to do is fire the watch method, and for the first parameter, we just pass in the name of the variable that we want to watch, and we want to watch this new to do name variable. So I'll pass that in here, new to do name. For the second parameter, we just have a callback, and this will give us access to the new value if we pass a variable name in here, such as new value. So I'll just log out new value for now, save that, and hopefully if we change the value of this input, we should see the new value being logged out. And yeah, that seems to be working. So now I'm just going to copy the code from our original watcher, which is here. I'll just copy the stuff that's inside the method, paste it into this watcher, remove the comments, and I'll remove the console log as well. So in this if statement here, we want to check if this swear words array contains an item which is equal to whatever the user has typed in here. So whatever's in the value of this new to do name ref. So we don't need to use this here. We can just use swear words. And we don't need to use swear words dot value, because this swear words constant is just a normal constant. It's not a ref constant. We're not firing the ref method on it. It's just a normal constant. So we can just do if swear words dot includes, and we're passing in the new value here. So this bit should work. And if that's the case, then we want to set the value of new to do name back to an empty string. So instead of this dot new to do name, we want to do new to do name dot value equals empty string. We don't need to change this alert. So hopefully that should work now. So I'll save that, and we can type in most strings, no problem. If we type in Willie, then it stops us. You must never say Willie. So we've already recreated this app now using the composition API instead of the options API. But there's one more thing that I wanted to cover, which is reactive objects. So right now we're using refs to manage our reactive data. But there is an alternative to using refs with the composition API, which is a bit more similar to using the data object in the options API. And that's by using reactive objects. So let's move our reactive data, so our new to-do name variable and our to-dos variable, into a reactive object. So to do this, we do need to import the reactive method from Vue, and we can now set up a reactive object. So I'll do that after these two refs. So to do that, we just want to fire the reactive method and pass in an object like this. And then we want to assign this to something. So I'll assign it to a variable called data, although you can use any name you want. And we also need to add this to our return statement. So I'll add that down here as well, data. And now any properties we add to this object will be reactive. And one of the cool things about using a reactive object instead of refs is that we don't need to do this .value thing, which you'll see soon. So let's set up some properties for our new to-do name and our to-dos in this reactive object. So I'll add a property called new to-do name, and just set that to an empty string. And then I'll add a property called to-dos and set that to an empty array. And I'll save that. And now let's update our template to use the data that's in this reactive object instead of these refs. So I'll jump up to the template and this Vue model. We now want to change this to data.newToDoName. So I'll change this here to data.newToDoName. And our to-dos array here, we now want to use the to-dos array, which is at data.todos. So I'll change this to data.todos. Save that. And just to make sure this is hooked up okay, let's just put something in this data.newToDoName property. Save that. And we see it in the input, so that's hooked up okay. Let's just quickly add some to-dos to this array to see if we see them on the page. So I'll copy these to-dos from the old code and paste them inside this array. Remove the comments, save that, and we can see the to-dos on the page. And I'll just set this back to an empty array. So now we need to update our methods to use this reactive object instead of these refs. So I'll jump down to add to do. So when we set up the new to do object, we want to set the ID to the date, which is fine. And then we want to set the name to the property at data.newToDoName. So I'll change this here to data.newToDoName. And notice that we don't need to use .value here. All we need to use is the property name within the object. And we don't want to push this new to-do object to todos.value anymore. We want to push it to data.todos. So I'll change this to data.todos.push. And to clear the new to-do name property, we now want to set data.newToDoName to an empty string. So I'll change this bit to data.newToDoName. Set that to an empty string. So I'll save that. Let's see if we can add a to-do. Yep, that's working. So let's update our delete to-do method. So we no longer want to remove the item from todos.value. We want to remove it from data.todos. So I'll remove todos.value, change that to data.todos.splice. Save that. And let's see if that's working. I'll add some to-dos. Yeah, the delete method is working now. However, our computed property is not working. This always says 0 now. So let's update our computed property to use this reactive object instead. So instead of returning todos.value.length, we want to return data.todos.length. So I'll change this to data.todos and save that. Let's see if that's working. So if we add some to-dos, yeah, we can see the count is being updated there. However, our watcher is no longer working. We can still type in fart, no problem. So let's update our watcher to use the reactive object instead of these refs. Now we can't watch a nested object property like this, data.newToDoName. That's not going to work. So what we're going to do is watch the whole data object, and I'll just log out new value here so we can see what's going on. Save that. So if we type something in here, we have an error there. So I'll just get rid of this if statement for now. So we just have the console log. I'll reload that. So if we type something in here, we can see new value being logged out, but it's logging out the value of the whole of this data object. So I'll open up that, open up this target, and we can see our new to-do name property in here. So we want to check if this value here is contained within our swear words array. So I'll just uncomment this if statement. So we're checking if the swear words array includes something, but now we want to check if new value.newToDoName is contained in that array. So I'll just change this new value here to new value.newToDoName, and I'll save that. And if that's the case, then we want to clear the field, but we don't want to set newToDoName.value to an empty string. We want to set data.newToDoName to an empty string. So I'll change this to data.newToDoName and set that to an empty string instead. And in this alert, we don't want to just spit out new value, because remember, that's going to be equal to this proxy object. So what we want to spit out there is the same as we did here, new value.newToDoName. So I'll copy that, paste that here, and I'll save that. Let's see if our watcher is working. So I'll type in butt hair, and yeah, it's working, except we're not seeing the value in this alert. And I think that's because we're actually clearing the value of data.newToDoName here. So I'll just switch these lines around and see if that works. Type in butt hair, and it's now working. You must never say butt hair. And we're not using our refs anymore, these refs that we set up here. So I'll just comment these out and remove the ref method from the import. And I'll also remove these refs from our return statement as well. So new to-do name and to-dos, get rid of those. Save that. Let's just make sure everything is working. I'll just remove this console.log. Save that. Reload. So we can add to-dos. We see our computed property. And we can delete to-dos. And we can no longer type in butt hair. If you've enjoyed this video, please check out one of my other Vue JS videos above. And if you want to see more content from me more frequently, then please consider clicking my face over there and clicking subscribe, because the more subscribers I get, the more content I can create. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.